Mm. You can hide this one.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So, dear learners, today we have with us Dr. Akansha Mishra. She is assistant professor at Kamala Nehru College, and she has done her graduation from University of Delhi and the PhD from JNU New Delhi. She is having around 8 years of experience, and we welcome you, ma'am, for today's presentation on human impact on natural resources with forest resource in perspective. Please start the session, ma'am. We look forward to hear from you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this giving me this opportunity to present uh, my work or the presentation on the human impact on natural resources. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our topic of discussion would be human impact on natural resources with forest resources in perspective. So, what I intend to progress in such a ways that we talk about resources first, the types of resources, and how they are degraded and how they can be conserved. Then, in full, we will try to talk about in detail about as a case study about the forest resources. So, to begin with, I would like to start, and I would prefer it like if you have some questions, we can keep asking it in between itself. Okay, so what is a resource? What is the concept of a resource? So, resource is something that is useful for humanity, and that itself is a big thing because as the human beings have developed and they have progressed economically, socially, mentally, our needs have changed. But to begin with, we have to realize that for our most essential, most basic needs, we have always been dependent on resources that we derive from nature. And those resources are referred to as or called as natural resources. So you can say natural resources are the components of environment that can be drawn upon, that can be used for fulfilling the human needs. And needless to say, environment provides us with so many things, beginning from food, shelter, clothing, which are essential for the survival of human beings and for its development. Apart from the raw material that we get from nature, nature also provides a lot of services to us. So when we combine all the services that we derive from nature, that we get from nature, and all the resources along with that, we call it, in a combined way, we call it something called natural capital. So, natural capital can be described as resources and natural services that keep us and other species alive and support our economies. But one thing we have to remember whenever we talk about natural resources, it has got a human centric approach. How human centric? Because from the point of view of availability, from the point of view of conservation, from the point of view of usage, we keep the needs of human beings at the center. Like how this can be a resource, how mines can be a resource for human being, how wood or forest can be a resource to human beings, how different types of natural service can be a resource to human beings. We generally capitalize on those things. So the approach in finding something useful to human beings in nature is a human centric approach, and we look at the resources and the things available in nature as something how they can be useful to human beings, and how they can be used as a resource for our development, okay, be it economical, social, or other in other perspectives. The context, and the second important thing about this is the context of natural resources has been changing with time and advancement of science and technology. For example, fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, natural gas, they were never a resource to us until the time we have invented steam engines and the engines that can run our vehicles. So they were not a resource to us then. But the moment we realized we found a use to certain thing, that becomes a resource to us. So with as our society develops, as we look for certain things, like when solar panel technology was developed, before that, semiconductor had limited use to us. But after that, semiconductor became a very important resource for human beings. So with the development of human society, science and technology, the concept of resource and what can be a resource to us also changes. So this is all resource, natural capital. This slide here is showing what is natural capital in terms of resources and what all services do we get from nature. So natural resources here, as it can be seen, so air, water, soil, land, life in terms of biodiversity, non-renewable resources like iron and other minerals. Then you have renewable energy like sun, wind, water flows, non-renewable energy like fossil fuels, nuclear power. And there, the list is endless. You can add many more resources which are every day finding new use for us. Then these natural resources, along with the natural services like air purification, water storage, soil renewal, nutrient recycling, food production, conservation of biodiversity, wildlife habitat, grassland and forest renewal, waste treatment, climate control, population control through species interactions, and pest control. These are the natural services provided to us without even we being contributed. So, in order to fulfill the ecosystem functional requirements, we are getting these services. When an ecosystem is stable and sustainable, then these services will be provided to us. Okay, this is all in combination with natural resources are referred to as natural capital. There are some more examples of natural resources: fresh water, soil, land, ecosystem, oil refinery, oil extraction from the base of the ocean, fisheries, and biodiversity. They are all part of the natural resources that we use. Now, what are the types of natural resources? So far, for our convenience, we have classified, we try to classify things. We humans are good at it. So we try to classify our natural resources on the basis of many categories. And one which is a popular one is on in terms of its renewability, availability, and abundance. And on basis of these three parameters, we can classify natural resources into renewable resource. A renewable resource is one that can be renewed or reproduced through natural processes mostly derived from living organisms. When consumed faster than replenishment rate, they become non renewable. So, we will be discussing these points in detail later on. And then the non renewable resource that cannot be replenished in time relevant to human usage. So, the important factor here is the time in which it is getting renewed, right? We can also classify resources on the basis of their nature, like organic resources. Organic resources, inorganic resources, and mixed resources. What would be organic resources? Organisms such as plants, forests, like which they grow on their own, animals, microbes, products, and products derived from them. So something which has got uh, origin lying in the living form. Then you have inorganic resources like water, air, rocks, minerals, etc. Then you have mixed resources like which is a combination of both organic and inorganic resources, and soil makes a perfect example for that. Now, the natural resources can also be classified based on their occurrence, like where they are found. Now, these are terms which you will find in many reference books because some refer to them as national, international, organic based on the requirement what they are trying to build upon. So, international resources. Now, these resources are available everywhere with no boundaries. Example, sunlight. Okay, available everywhere, and anyone is free to use them. Then, national resources. These are restricted to a particular country. Example, physical features, flora, fauna, and human resources. Then you have multinational resources. These resources are shared between more than one countries. For example, water resource, Brahmaputra River. The water from Brahmaputra River is shared between India and China. And there are many examples of that. Another factor on which the resources can be shared is a biotic resource, which is organic in nature, include forests and its produce, animals, fossil fuels are also biotic in origin. Then you have abiotic resources. Then again, they are inorganic, composed of non-living matter, land, water, and minerals. But if you try to look at all these resources, you can conveniently divide them or classify them on the basis of their renewability again. So exhaustible, inexhaustible, renewable, non-renewable. This can all be compiled into one format, which is referred to here as the natural resources and their types. So natural resources primarily divide as renewable and non-renewable. But the important factor here is this. I would like to highlight it here is the conditionality of renewability. Okay, so renewable resources, which are there are two categories, unconditionally renewable, and the other one is conditionally renewable. Okay, unconditionally renewable means those resources which we can use in any way we want, and yet they would be available for usage. They are referred to as unconditionally renewable resources. For example, there is only one such resource, and that is a abiotic resource, and that is sun. In terms of conditionally, where certain conditions are applied for renewability of a resource, those resources are called conditionally renewable. They can further be divided into three categories. One, abiotic, which involves like biogeochemical cycling, like water, phosphate, nitrate, oxygen. They are all abiotic in nature. Then you have conditional renewability in case of simple biotic uh, resources, like which involves reproduction and growth, for example, fisheries and trees. Then again, you have complex biotic like ecosystem. So what is the condition here in the renewability is that all these resources can be renewed in a time which is of human usage, which which is under the framework of human usage, provided we use these resources carefully. If we don't use this resource carefully, there is more of degradation, there is more of depreciation, then these resources would also fall in the category of non-renewable resources. They can easily turn into a non-renewable resource depending upon how we are using them. Okay. Then the second category of natural resources is obviously the non-renewable one. And why they are non-renewable? Because of the time taken in which they can be again refurnished into the environment is unknown, or even if it is known, it is very long. So for example, fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, natural gas. Then there are mineral resources. The mineral resources can be metallic or non-metallic. Metallic can be iron, copper, aluminium, and other resources, whereas non-metallic, phosphorus is one example of that. So this is how we can classify or organize resources based on their availability and their duration in which they can be renewed and how we can use them. Are they falling into the category where they can replenish themselves in the human time scale, or it is taking longer than that? Now, the next is degradation of natural resources. Now, we first started talking about that natural resources is something which is fulfilling the needs of human beings in the long run. But when we start using these resources, what happens to them is that there is some kind of depreciation, some kind of loss, because we are using them. So, any kind of depreciation in the quantity or quality of a resource is referred to as resource degradation. For resources which are non-renewable and for the resources which are renewable, there can be different parameters applied. For example, a non-renewable resource is considered economically depleted when 80% of its estimated supply has been removed or used. For example, coal, in case of mineral resources, if we know that a certain mine or certain region has a capacity to give us, let's say, 100 tons of coal, and if we have used 80% of it, 80 tons of it, then we can say that now this resource is economically depleted, because beyond that point, it would not be financially feasible, economically feasible to extract resource from that mine. Either the process will turn expensive or the revenue you will generate from it would be decreasing, right? But in case of biotic resources, the when the resources can regrow, which they can, they can attain a certain level of sustainability, the parameters are different, because we know that this is the time they are going to take to regenerate. So we can, if given an option, we can use them sustainably for a very long period of time. We further talk about this. Now, the highest rate at which a renewable resource can be used without decreasing its potential for natural replacement is known as its natural replacement rate. This is very much plausible, understandable in case of renewable resources like fisheries and forests, for which we know a certain time, they take a certain time to regrow. Okay. So NRR, natural replacement rate for fossil fuel, is very long. Hence, it becomes practically non-renewable. Okay. In case of biological resources, if the sustained yield is exceeded, the base supply begins to decline. Now, I always tell my students with this good example. Suppose you have got 100 trees of a certain type of wood, which is very economically profitable, and they have a regrowing time of 10 years. So how can we use them sustainably? Suppose if we cut them the first 10 in first year, and then we plant another 10. Second year, another 10. Plant another 10. So by the time we know that the total capacity is 100 trees. Now, if we are cutting 10 trees every year and we are planting 10 trees every year, then the 11th year again we will be having a fresh supply of 10 trees. So if we know the cycle of the resource, like how long does it take to regrow itself, to replace itself, then we can very efficiently use the resource over a long period of time. Now, humans have consumed resources to fulfill their basic needs of food, shelter, and clothing. And with the development of science and technology, we have multiplied the consumption, which has multiplied the consumption, and the nature of resources have changed. Like I told you before, the things that were not, you know, were used before are now a resource for us. For example, rare earth elements. They may not have been a resource for us, but since the invention of LEDs, they have become a very important resource for us. And even now, for I have given this example here, there's 90%. How grossly we are dependent on the nature for the supply of resources. It's one example of that. And 90% of the world's paper production is still on happening from the wood. We are still not able to find a good alternative for manufacturing paper. See, this is how deeply we are dependent on nature for fulfilling our needs. Now, the continued use of natural resources have degraded the resource quality and quantity, with time referred to as depletion time. Now, what is depletion time? Depletion time of a resource. Depletion time of a resource is the time scale along which the resource availability would decrease globally, that it would not be available to meet human needs. Okay, so how long does a resource take when the human beings are using it, and how the human beings are using it is referred to as its depletion time. So some resources have got a rapid depletion time because of the policy how we are extracting them, and you are using and throwing them away. A very good example of this is fossil fuel and phosphorus reserves. Now, fossil fuels, we don't know how long they are going to regenerate, but what are we doing with them? We are taking them out from one end and using them and just putting in them in some other form in the environment. Like you take out coal, you burn it, and you produce CO2 and other harmful gases and putting them back in the environment. Same goes with phosphorus reserve. So phosphorus is it's a very important resource, and we need it for fertilizers. But what is how we are using it is a very wasteful method of using it, because we are putting in fertilizers, and phosphorus once harvested, it just flows down with water and settles at the base of the ocean, and hence we cannot use it all over again. So this is rapid depletion time. This use of these resources is very rapid. So using it from one end, throwing it in the other. Then you have resources which can have extended depletion time, which comes with proper management and reduction and recovery of waste. How can we minimize the waste? So for most of the metals, this can be done because metals can be recycled as well. And then you have resources which can be degraded in infinite depletion time with various conservation strategies, reduction, recycling, and substitution. Now, this is what I was talking about. Here you can see here human capital, natural capital. We are putting human economic and cultural systems, means how we are using it. We produce goods and services for us in this process, and what we are actually doing, converting this natural capital and our human capital as well, turning into heat, depletion of non-renewable resources, degradation of renewable resources, pollution and waste again back into the nature, taking it, disposing it, and part of it can be recycled and reused. That will determine the depletion time of one particular resource, whatever that be in consideration. This graph is an old graph from a paper by Vitusik et al. In 1997. But I found it very relevant because this is showing how percentage wise we have transformed different components of environment and affecting it severely, like land transformation. Till 1997 we would have almost 50% of the land had been transformed from its original usage. Then the carbon dioxide concentration has increased, water usage has increased, nitrogen fixation has increased, plant invasion has increased, bird extinction, marine fisheries, the usage have been increased tremendously. So the humans are having a huge impact on natural resources. Okay. Now the dependency on natural resources with time, as you can see here, with time, this was in 1997, almost like 24 years ago. And over this time, we have increased our dependency on natural instead of decreasing. Okay, and why this is happening? Because three, four important factors are there. Number one, population growth. This factor is indirectly affecting all the usage of natural resources and has got multi-dimensional effects. Because a growing population needs land for infrastructure, land for agriculture to meet the food requirements, land for industry for producing various consumer products, water availability, groundwater recharge, and which in turn may have caused many natural disasters like floods. Then, secondly, uneven distribution of natural resources. This is also an important factor because, as I told you, that national, international, all those resources are not uniformly distributed across the world. Petroleum is a wonderful example for that, which is mainly concentrated in some Middle Eastern countries. And the resources which may be found somewhere else are of the poor quality. So the revenue collection or the profitability in extracting those resources is very poor. And the second is like rare earth elements, as I was giving you the example. After the invention of LEDs, the rare earth elements have become the uh, new currency, you can say. And China has the richest reserves of rare earth elements in the world. And when such non-uniform distribution occurs, the economies are dependent on certain countries or for their resources, which leads to economic conflicts and natural conflicts as well. Then you have industrial development, leading, which is a leading cause of deforestation for mining, fossil fuel consumption, large quantities of water consumption and electricity. Then overexploitation. On top of it, we have got overuse of resources that has led to shortage and non-availability of resources and hence the price increase. So it is not that we are not feeling the crunch of resources, but every time we are paying a higher price for any commodity, then we are then it is an indicator that we have exploited our resources. I think there is a question here. Tejaswini? Yes?
Hello. Hi. What is
Yes.
rare earth elements?
Rare earth elements, in periodic table, there are certain elements which are of heavy size. So they are used in manufacturing LEDs. LEDs, LED bulbs are there. Now, before you will see that in remote controls, there used to be small bulbs which
Yes.
which you know which help you make turn off and turn on the TV. Now those LEDs and nor gates in physics we used to study. So these rare earth elements are an integral part of those uh, LED circuits, and they are used in bulbs now and those devices now as well. That's why for manufacturing, because we are all talking about electricity conservation, whenever we say electricity conservation, we say okay, replace your normal bulbs with the LED bulbs, and LED bulbs are expensive also. So to make an LED bulb, you need to have those REs, and hence see this how this energy sector is driving across the countries your orientation towards the REs. So naturally, if a country is rich in one particular such resource on which everybody is dependent, that makes give rise to certain kinds of economic conflicts as well, right? So RE is basically what your question was. In periodic table, there is a group of elements. Like we have alkaloids, like we have metals, non-metals, and we have radioactive elements. Similarly, there is some, yeah, lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium, neodymium. Yeah, you can find them. So it's a group of elements in the periodic table, which is good for these kind of devices. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Then industrial development, over exploitation, overuse of resources lead to shortage and non-availability of uh, resources. Hence the price increase. Okay. Now, conservation of natural resources. For non-renewable resources, there are two scenarios: conservation for renewable and conservation for non-renewable. So people say that even if you apply conservation strategies for non-renewable resources, they would still remain exhaustible. But the good thing about conservation of non-renewable resources is that you can increase their depletion time. So their depletion time can be extended, right? And for renewable resources, it is a lot more systematic thing. If you know the life cycle of resources, okay, so in this period, in 10 years, like if this tree is going to regrow, if we plant a sapling now, then 10 years hence we will have another harvest of forest or trees. So fisheries and forests, they can easily be conserved provided we know their life cycle and how they can be used, right? Now the mainly the
Yeah,
resource
Akansha,
conservation. Yes.
please make it full
Yes.
screen.
Oh yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am, I forgot to.
Yeah.
Right. So the resource conservation aims to why we should have resource conservation in the first place. The bottom line is to remember that everything is limited. The resources available on earth is limited. That's why we need to conserve them. And for the following reasons, that we need to maintain an ecological processes and line sustaining systems keep on going and maintained so that our future generations are benefited, ensure continuous yield of plants, animals, and other material, to preserve the quality of environment, to conserve biological diversity, to achieve sustainable use of species and ecosystems, to achieve sustainability of resources for the future. And it is not that only uh, sustainable use, we also have to ensure that there is a equitable distribution of resources. This unequitable distribution has led to many problems, like poverty, and some section of the society are not able to uh, even have access to certain resources like clean water. Clean water is a basic necessity for everyone. It cannot be, you cannot distinguish anyone that this person is more in need of it, this person is less in need of it. Everyone needs it, so it has got to be an equitable availability and distribution of resources. That's why we have to make sure that sustainability is maintained. Now we will be talking about forest resources, talking these things, conservation, degradation, and how can we conserve it in the long run by taking forest resource as an example. Because forest resource is a biotic resource and a renewable resource as well. Now, forest resource. Now, what is a forest? Forest is a complex community of associated trees, shrubs, other plants, and animals. In this community, all the members interact with each other and play some part in the complex ecosystem, complex system. Okay. If you look online, you will find multiple definitions of forest. But the one which is more generally and commonly accepted is according to the Food and Agricultural Organization. Or in 2000, they gave this report in their Global Forest Resource Assessment report, that forests are defined as land spanning more than zero point 0.5 hectare with trees higher than 5 meters, and a canopy cover of that land area should be more than 10%. Then only you can call that area as a forest. Or trees able to reach these thresholds in situ, means naturally they should be able to meet these criterions. It does not include land that is predominantly under agricultural or urban land use. So naturally this has got to be growing in setup. So this is the definition of a forest. Now, how forest is a resource? Like any other resource, forest provides us with lots of ecological and economic services, as can be seen in this. We are going to talk about them in little detail. Yes, the first important resource that a forest provides us and we could think of is wood. And when we talk of wood, there are various grades of lumber grades are there for making furniture, for making barrels, boxes, cabinets, flooring, millwork, and many more. Then there are certain products which are made from by converting wood into certain other things like paper pulp, wood fiber, charcoal, rayon, cellulose, photographic film, etc. So these are the main wood. When you take forest as an example, you think that okay, wood is the prime thing that we harvest from a forest. Then you have non-timber forest products. They are also referred to as NTFPs. So this include resin, dye, oil seeds, nuts, medicinal plants, silk, honey, wax, natural rubber, tannins, essential oil, fodders, fibers. Why these are equally important? Because they are not only uh, serving as for some economic process or some industrial process. These products are the livelihood source for many tribal people who live in the forest. So this non-timber forest products has an added advantage or added use, especially for the tribal people whose economy and whose sustenance depend mainly on these NTFPs. Okay. Then we have the other goods and services that forests provide is climate moderation through transpiration. A very, the canopy of the forest that blocks the sunlight and keeps the soil from drying. It's an important contribution of forest. And during cold weather, forests also break harsh winds. Forests also help in keeping the loud sounds quiet, and it also filters the dust from air. So locally, even if locally you have more trees in your neighborhood, you will see that the temperature in your surrounding area is a little more comfortable for you, and you are enjoying the benefits of all these services. Then it also helps in water and soil conservation, which is a effective vegetative cover for soil and water control. The canopy of the forest breaks the speed of falling water and hence control the floods. Root system is also able to hold soil particles together, and in the process of water passing through the soil, the water also gets filtered, so it provides clean, reliable surface water from streams and lakes. This also forest also helps us in greenhouse gas exchange through process of photosynthesis. So they take up CO2 and release oxygen. And last but not least, they are also protecting wildlife, and they are a source of recreation for human beings. But the sad thing is that the world's forest cover in the since we have started agriculture, it used to be more than 50%, but now it has been reduced to less than 30% at the global level. Now, how the global forest resource or forest resource is distributed across the globe. Now, the forest can be divided on the which zone they are falling in into these four categories: tropical zone, boreal zone, temperate, and subtropical zone. So the tropical zone, which is like 23.5 degree uh, north to 23.5 degrees south, Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, the forest found in this zone is in the tropical, which is the largest zone having a rich forested area. Interestingly, if you look at the map, the tropical zone has got the maximum number of developing countries where they need these resources for development. So, as a result, what is happening? The areas which have got the richest forest are the same areas where they have got the maximum of exploitation of these resources going on. Then the boreal zone 33%, temperate 11, and subtropical you have 9% of forest of the world. Now, according to the latest data, as I found in the Food and Agriculture Organization report of 2020, these are the 10 countries which are having the forest maximum amount of means top 10 countries having the forest. So I'm not going to talk about any other. Let's have a look at the Indian status. Here it is India. India is here, and here it is. So in 2% of the world's forest, 2% of the world's forests are in India, according to this report, and it has got 72 million hectares. India has got 72 million hectares covered under 72 million hectares and has got 2% of the world's forest in India. And how these forests are distributed in India. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, 30% of India was covered with forest. Okay. And now that has been reduced to 23%. This is according to India's State of Forest Report 2021, the latest one, which is much less than the national goal. And what is our national goal? It is said that to have a good sustainable development, 33% of the land area, whatever land you have, should be under forest cover to have a good sustainable development. And we are lagging very much behind our national goal, what we want to achieve, which is also reflected in the world average for per capita forests, which is 0.64 hectare per person. And here in India, what's the Indian average of per capita forest is 0.06 hectare. So we are lagging behind it. And whatever forest we have in India, we it is generally classified as very dense, moderately dense, open forest, total forest cover, and scrub forest and non-forest. So percentage wise, according to the latest ISFR report, this is how it is distributed. Okay. Now the human impacts on forest, how we have been using them in the long run, and how we have been degrading them. So why do we need forest? Why do we degrade them, and how do we impact them? We impact them for their natural resources, for number one, for extracting wood. And in India, which is still where a large population is dependent on, uh, rather, India is one of the topmost country using fuel wood. So we need wood not only for our commercial purpose, but also to fulfill the needs of fuels for a large population. Plus, as a source of raw material for paper, plywood, matches, boxes, crates, etc. This we have discussed. Now, developmental projects like large dams, laying railway lines, roads, they are all equally important for a developing country like India, where we are trying to fulfill our basic needs of the poor population, of connectivity, connecting different people. So these are also equally important. But in the process of doing this, we are harming our roads. Through roads, we are harming our forests a lot. Then shifting cultivation, agriculture, urbanization, overgrazing. Now, overgrazing is another very interesting thing, because when you leave animals on the field, they not only eat or consume the top part of the plant. What they do, they completely remove the plant from the soil. So when the roots are lost, the soil becomes loose. So overgrazing is a very pertinent danger to land degradation, and hence, it is also going to impact the deforestation to a large extent. Then industrialization and mining. Mining requires, the first step in mining is the clearing of forest. You clear the forest because most of the time the mines are covered with thick, dense forest. To start mining, the first step you need to do is to clear the forests. Plus, it is quite polluting to the environment. Acid mine drainage is released, which leads to contamination of forest water bodies, and the afforestation is difficult in such deep craters which the mine creates. Another fact here, forests are shrinking, especially in developing countries which are located in the tropic and arid regions of the world, whereas only 1% of the temperate forests are lost. Now, impacts of deforestation. When you degrade the forest, when you deforest, then frequent flood, increased soil erosion, extinction of plant, global climate change, both at the local and global and regional level, and the budget of greenhouse gases is deeply impacted. And these kind of impacts are very well known. Like in the past 2 3 years consecutively, Kerala has been receiving floods. And people say that because of the massive deforestation that has undergone in Western Ghats, many ecologists blame this deforestation to link it to the Kerala floods that it has been receiving consecutively. Then, how do we manage? What is forest conservation and management? Again, we need to conserve our forest resources for the sustainable supply for all the goods and services it provides to us. And FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, in 1999 has explicitly defined this National Forestry Action Program, that what should be done. I think we should also apply such things, and we have been applying. I will discuss in the upcoming slides that we should protect existing forest resources, improve forest productivity, reduce total demand of forest products, strengthen policy and institutional framework, and expand the existing forest area. This should be our approach. So how in India we are trying to achieve these things, and across the world. Now, protection of degraded forest is important to allow them to recoup. Recoup means to recover the flora and fauna diversity. This can be achieved through different steps like forest plantations, where what you can do is to extensively afforest an area which is needed to save the fast losing forest cover. Although one thing here needs to be important, discussed, is that whenever you destroy a natural forest and go for afforestation and you're planting different trees, the composition can never be same as that of a natural forest, because a natural forest that has developed over a period of 500 to 1000 years maybe, that has developed, it has taken, so each and every organism that exists in a forest ecosystem has a perfect role to play in it. And when we go for afforestation, we are obviously inclined or biased towards certain species, but main thing is that we should understand the ecological requirement of trees, or in what environment do they sustain well. I have given a reference to eucalyptus debate. You can, in my references, I have given the link. You can read it in that. Then, social forestry is another mechanism in which the trees and shrubs are planted on unused fallow land to provide fuel wood, fodder, etc. Then agroforestry, which is a combination of agriculture and forests combined, which helps in maintaining the soil fertility, and you can maintain crop, pastures, and livestock on the same land. Then this agroforestry helps in soil and water conservation. This is also used as windbreaks and prevent land degradation and expansion of desertification. Then there is another mechanism called joint forest management. In joint forest management, local community equally participates in the management of forest. This was first introduced in India in 1990. So local community, what here, how do they manage? Local community provide labor and protect the forest from deforestation, and the income, whatever income the forest is giving, is partially shared between the community, and the uh, government pays them little thing back. Then it also helps in the improvement of relation between stakeholders, that is because generally the tribal community living in the forests or the other village communities take, there is a certain hostility in the government officials and the forest officials. So in case of joint forest management, this helps improve the relations between different stakeholders in the case, And then it also helps in the improvement of the forests in the long run. A beautiful example of community protecting the forest. I could not skip this one out because I want to end this on a note that, with the community's activism, we can achieve a lot, and that is sacred groves. Now, what are sacred groves? These are the kind of forests which are protected by the community on the religious grounds. They say that they have got some religious association with the forest, and then they protect it naturally, because they say that if this is the abode of the god or whatever system of faith they have, so this the environment around it should be protected and it should not be destroyed. So these forests are community protected under Wildlife Protection and Amendment Act 2002, and these forests are important and significant to religion, where hunting and logging is prohibited because of the religious factors. There are many examples, like the scrub forests of Thar by Bishnois and the Deodar in Himachal Pradesh, and in Kerala they are called as Kavus. In Delhi, there is one called Mangarbani. In Uttarakhand, you have Haryali near Gauchar and Chamoli. In Meghalaya, they are called Moflang and Mosmai. Here are some images of the sacred groves where the surrounding wildlife, or the forest, is protected in the name of religion, and that is completely done by the community, right? This has, I think these examples are repeated here. Now this has got a lot of significance because it helps in conservation of biodiversity, aquifer recharge, water groundwater recharge, then soil conservation. And just like other things, this also has its threats coming up, like the disappearance of traditional system, rapid urbanization and development, temple system, exotic weeds, and increasing livestock and fuel wood consumption. So I would like to end my presentation here, and I would say that to achieve sustainability of resources, we need to know the background of the resource and how long does it take to replenish it naturally, and what can we as a community do along with the participation of other stakeholders, the government, the forest officials, to maintain these resources. And at an individual level, we should try and minimize the use of things which consume natural resources to a large extent. We can, if we minimize the decision that we take for ourselves, the choices that we make for ourselves is the biggest idea of sustainability. At the implementation or at the governance level, we can have policies, but ultimately it comes down to the choices that we as an individual make, that okay, don't want something because it was going to put a burden on the natural resource consumption. Now I would like to thank all of you for listening to my presentation patiently, and if there are any questions, you're most welcome.